Okay, so I just want to talk about the roof panel. So it's going to be one big solid sheet out of 60 thou. And what I want to do is the roof, okay, so the roof is going to cantilever out quite a ways. Like here's the draft. This part of the wall where the grill is, which is this part here, okay, this sits in like that on the model. I'll just show you on the actual model here. It's going to drop in here. I want to build some of these rooms where they're convertible. I can like move them, right, lock them in, because this model has to come apart if I'm going to paint it, right, with any kind of integrity. So, right, you want to bear that in mind when you're building from your draft. You can't draft everything. You got to draft a bit, build, and then add to your drawing or whatever, and revise as you go, as you think each procedure through. So I had to think through how I'm going to do the roof, because I'll show you why, or explain to you why. So the glazing, there's this tall window, right, that has a big curve in it right here, which is really going to be the feature corner of the building, which really gives the whole diner its character to begin with. So I'm going to be using probably 15 thou clear acetate or styrene or whatever I decide to go with. Probably evergreen clear, 15 thou. So I want the glass, I'll just use the term glass or glazing, to sit down in behind this pony wall here. Okay, so I'm going to build this pony wall up with another wall behind it with a slot in it, about a 15 thou slot. So it'll fit in nice and tight. But I need the roof to be the same, okay? So I took the diameter or circumference off the drawing here, like this, to do the bottom pony wall, right? So I'm going to do the same here. Okay, for the roof, because the top of the glazing is going to sit against here. Well, inside of this, because what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to skin the edge of this when I cut this out, just like this, so the whole thing comes down like a cap. But I need to have, this established, which it already is right now. I'll build the inside a little bit later, but I want to do the same. I'm going to build the roof just like the floor, but upside down, so that it comes down and locks the glazing, the vertical glazing, in place. That way I can lift the roof off and then pull the glazing out and paint it, and then put the glazing back in and pop the roof on, you see? Okay? So that's the method to my madness there. Now another thing is too, is because the roof cantilevers out, well, it'll about halfway down the length of the model, so there's going to be this roof section. Like what am I going to support it with? Well, I can support it with the rear wall, but on the corner here, there's nothing to support it other than the glazing itself. Now let me just point something out with the painting, with the original painting that Edward Hopper probably added in. If I can use this here for a second. See how he added a pole here? Because okay, so whether this was an actual feature on the original building, I don't even know, right? Because we don't have the, the data or the blueprints or drawings of the original diner. But obviously you can't just have this glazing strip to support the whole roof. You can't cantilever out that far. The whole thing would collapse, right? So there's a pole here holding it up. Now, whether that meets code, I don't think so. But anyway, that's the fantasy or the artistic license, right? Edward Hopper might have just added this in because of his critics, right? It's enough there to silence them, isn't there? Because it's this scene that was important to him. Anyway, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a brass rod here. I'm going to drill it for a brass rod and a brass rod so that when I put the roof on, it'll fit snug and lock in. So the brass rod will probably be cased with a piece of evergreen plastic, some Art Deco plastic or something, just to justify that long span here and to feature this big open curved window, okay? Okay, so here's a tool that every scratch builder should have, and this is by Olfa. It's a circle cutter, and you only need to scribe. You don't have to cut plastic, remember? You just scribe it and snap it. So I don't use this very often. I bought this, oh, I don't know, 20 years ago, but they're the same. I've seen them. They're everywhere, Olfa. And it has a nice little compartment here for spare blades that opens up. Okay. Mind you, I haven't had to change my blade very often because I don't use it that much, but when you need it, it's a real godsend. Okay, this Olfa circle cutter, especially if you're scribing 10 thou, oh, it's just like paper, right? But any thou, like this is 60 thou, and I'll show you what I do. I just set this up from the point from where I drew my compass line, and then I just adjust it with the little adjustment here and lock it in. And then I just do a series of light passes. Don't push down too hard on it, right? You don't have to. You just scribe that circumference several times like that, and then you can chase it with a knife after with a number 11 or whatever you want, right? Once you get the trough in there, and then just snap it away and just clean it up with your little board sander, and you're good to go. You have a nice clean line there. Okay. Okay, so this is the top surface of the roof here, and what I want to do is I want to add this right angle like this so that I got something to glue to when I do the upper header wall that the glass sits in. This will be the ceiling inside the diner. You can use square stock here. It'd be easier to bend this curve, but if you want to have the detail on the roof without that square stock, whereas you just have a right angle here, then I like to use in this particular case, number 292 right angle. Now the trick is to getting it to curve around here, because it won't just as a stock piece, right? It'll buckle, right? So I make little increments about 1/8 of an inch, okay? And then what I do is I just make little relief cuts from the point where, see where the compass point is here, with the square, the center? I drew a line there, I start them there. You can put one there too if you want. So it's glued up to here. Okay. Okay, so you can see where those little slots, those marks that I cut, just press down. I just cut a little bit of a wedge in them all the way around. That way when I pull this in to a curve, it doesn't pinch, right? So now I can put glue in there and it'll go down into those little slots as well and get a nice bond. And then once that's dry, you can just stroke that with a folded piece of sandpaper and it'll seal up nice. You get a nice curvature there, okay? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be holding this roof on with magnets, okay? Because I'm going to need to access it to replace lights and so on and to get into paint, as I mentioned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use magnets. So I have these little, I picked these up just on impulse at the hobby store. You can get them from other places, I'm sure. Miniature model magnets. They're rare earth magnets. And they're different sizes and so on. So what I'm going to do is have them in a couple of strategic places. And here I'm going to have one in the corner of the washroom here. I want to cut a wedge from this, some scrap. You can see where I backed up with some thinner plastic there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to install that one in there. Okay. Once that glue dries, I'll put some CA in there. And then this one here I drilled through. They're quite thin. So let me just zoom in here. I'll show you how I install in the ceiling. And that way you won't be able to see them. Okay. All right, so I've drilled a hole a little bit smaller than the magnet, right? Like the actual hole, like whatever size it is, just drill a hole a little bit smaller, and then I knife out the opening just to clean it so I get a nice tight fit. So what I'm going to do here is just slide that on. It's a magnetic little devil, isn't it? So I'm going to push it in like so, and then I'm just going to cover this because the roof's going to get some tar paper and texture on it anyway. So I'm going to use a very thin, probably 10 thou, just to cover that like a patch or whatever. Okay, and then you can see there it's flush. And then when the magnet is mounted here, the opposite polarity or magnetism, it'll just pull it down and hold it nice in place. Okay. Okay, so you can see what I did is I started it just with the spacer to test, and just to make sure that everything's going to go smoothly, right? And you can see that once you get this piece started in there, it'll slide in fairly easily. Now, what I want to do is I'm not going to use this now to chase all the way down because it's already been started and I know that this theory works. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push it up tight, see? Here. All the way along. All right. And I'm just going to work like 1 inch at a time, and I'm just going to dribble in some cement there. I'm not going to push against the bottom there. I'm just going to pinch it like that. I mean, if you have to, you can, but you don't want to mar the floor with the cement if you can help it. And then just glue the bottom. That's it. Just let the solvent capillary in, and it'll hold fine. So it'll close the top there. That's what you want, because when you put your window glazing in, when you start it, it'll fit nice. It'll just spring it back a ways and it'll fit nice and tight like that. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the pony wall again, because it has a little more ways to go. I'll just show you with the painting here, because the painting is part of the reference and my draft, my builder's model draft, right? Which is my interpretation of the full diner, right? And how I want to build it, how I see it, and how I want to represent it. But I want to use Edward Hopper's painting still as inspiration for the main features of the model on the exterior and what you see in the painting. So you can see the profile here on this lower pony wall. You can see I used 15 by 80 thou strip for the bottom here, and I'm going to use it for the top of the pony wall here, and then I'm going to use a half round. I have this number 241 half round, 80 or 60 thou, but I think I might go with 40 thou, like number 240, right, half round, just to create that bullnose effect on the top of this pony wall. Because this pony wall, you can see, is quite wide. Like, it's actually represented, like, see there? It looks quite wide. And Edward Hopper would have emphasized that because he knew it would be a horizontal surface that would reflect light, which is, he really liked the interior buildings at night, the light. So you can see where that's why he emphasized, like, he had this probably lower than normal pony wall, although they would have been common back then probably. But it was important that this counter and the top of the stools and this human activity is evident, right? But I want to make sure I do a nice job on this outside trim, because I think that'll look really good when it's painted, darker green and then highlighted a bit. So that's what I'm going to use. Now, I want to be careful that I don't glue the top of this seam now, because this top seam, even though there's a little bit of, like, little variance in the gaps here, see that there and there? Like, it's not totally tight, but that can be cinched up tight when you start to dress the outside of the pony wall and the inside. You can cinch that up. That's the beauty of scratch building. because this whole pony wall is going to become more and more rigid as you add more and more cosmetic finish or profile to it. Okay, so I'll just show you an example of how the glazing slides in. Like, see here, watch. 10 thou glazing. Okay, you can see how it'll go right around like that. See, and the top roof will hold the same profile, so it'll be nice and vertical and straight and clear, just like in the painting, see? Which is only this part. The painting only encompasses this much of the diner. Okay, so I just want to point out this final trim that I put on this small pony wall at number 240 half round. Okay, it's 40 thou half round, right? That I just applied, and you can see this pony wall with the bullnose trim just like on the model, see? All right, you can see the width of the top of the pony wall. The glass will run down this slot here. You can see it here on the painting. It's quite wide as well. I don't know if it's exact, but it doesn't really matter. Not in 1/87 scale, it doesn't. And then, of course, this will be a strip over the glass, and then this will be a pole of brass, probably brass or plastic, I'm not sure yet, that's going to go in here. But you can see now that that's about as close as it gets for me anyway, because I'm happy with that. And you can see the height of the bar or the counter. I haven't put the top countertop on, but right here. Okay, you can see it here, right? Okay, so I'm just putting a wash now. This dark brown, which is very close to raw umber. I don't want to use burnt umber, it's got too much red in it, so I'm going to go with dark brown, but I'm just mixing it with a little bit of this, what I have left over here, light gray wash. I don't normally use these kind, I just have so many paints kicking around. I just want to use it up. So this is just thin paint, that's all it is. But so I just mixed up a little bit of a slurry and a little bit of water. And I'm just going to paint in these tiles because I want to put some relief in there. Once this dries, what I'll do is mask it over. I'll show you how I'm going to do that, and I'm going to cut out just with a hobby knife the lines. Just trace through the tape and then pick out all the squares, all the offset squares like a checkerboard, and which I'll leave, which will be white, and then I'll spray black or a type of like a dark green. Okay, so you can see I got this dark brown wash on the tiles. So this is what I want initially. The back here is not going to be checkerboard, it's going to be white. It'll be checkerboard here, but I want this shadow relief in the tiles on all the tile. And you can see that I put the dark brown wash on. Now that it's dry, it's going to take some. This is 1000 wet and dry, and I'll just show you this area. So I just take a bit of water, okay, and then I'm just going to rub this over top. You can see how it removes the top surface of the paint only, which is what I want. Now you can try and do this with isopropyl alcohol, but the problem is you're going to wick up the paint inside those little engravings, right? And I don't want that. So Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of aged white on here. I've already done some already. So I'm going to take a little bit of Vallejo Model Air. You know, I'll use this now with just a brush. I don't shoot it through airbrush. I just use it for just with traditional brushwork. This is number 71.132 aged white. And I don't mind dry brushing with acrylic, except that you got to work fast because it dries fast. And that's what I like about it, right? Is it dries fairly quickly. So you can work with it right away. So you can see I'm just get most of it off and then just start stabbing it and sort of mopping it around with a bit of pressure. And you can see how it's aged the tiles down a bit. See there, compared to the outside there, and compared to this outside, see? Just a bit of aging. And why did I use the brown instead of black or gray for the engraving wash or pin wash, whatever you want to call it? Because it's warm. The brown is a warmer color, whereas a gray or a black is a cooler kind of color. With gray if it has any blue in it. But I like to use browns, as you know, because it has a warm feel. Even in my greens and yellows, if I want to get a warm tone to the model. Do the bathroom here. And when I get all the floor done, I'll probably put a satin coat on this. And then I'm going to mask it over. I'm going to mask it off nice and neat to the bottom of the baseboard all around. And then it'll be the last tape that I pull from the model when I, finish it. Whoops. Probably don't need that much more. I wonder if you can see. Yeah, see, you can see how it, see that? Okay, so what I've decided to do is I just put a little bit of a wash on the pony wall wainscoting and on the inside. What I'm going to do is I have a couple of methods of painting. I'm going to just go with the acrylic buildup, the layered process, but do it backwards. And what I mean by that is not to paint out the base colors first and then put a pin wash on, because that can tend to make things darker than what you really want. Because you're laying a filter on, right? Okay. This was different because I laid in the dark brown because I want a warm tone to the color, a warmness to the whole diner scene, especially when it's lit. It'll have a warmer feel to it. And I used some aged white just to beige out the floor tiles a bit. And then the brown with the black, mixed 50-50 or so wash, a dark brown. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to build up the colors. I'll reference the painting, the Edward Hopper painting, like green, blue, greenish blue, maybe, but I want to stay away from blue. And then this would be more of a reddish brown in here. And then, of course, the black and white checkerboard tile would be a nice touch if that's weathered down a bit. And then these rear walls will just be a beige, because it is a Reno diner with a sort of still nostalgic feel to it. That's the idea. And that's the idea with the browns, right? If you want to have a warm look to your model, try to put browns into your color. If you want a cool look, then use blues, right? Okay. Okay, so it's all masked. Okay. You gotta love Tamiya tape, right? Anyway, so this all stays covered. The only part that I'm going to cut for the checkerboard is this front area, the customer area right here. It's going to be checkerboard. And what I'm doing now is I'm just in the groove of these tiles. It's just it cuts a beautiful line. You just push your number 11 in like that, tight to the baseboard, and then just pull. And Tamiya tape's made for this kind of thing, as most of you know that use it. It's made for masking and cutting like this. There's no better tape than this, actually, for the hobbyist. And I have all the tapes for this kind of work, to me, a tape is the way to go. Now, you can see how after I cut them, I just pull them out here. See, just pop them out with a number 11. It's no big deal. It doesn't take that long. And it's actually kind of therapeutic, actually. So I got to flip this around and just chase these ones to the other side a bit. Okay. And, you know, you could use a decal, too, if you wanted to do this, if you're into trimming and cutting a decal. But when you do it this way and you paint it, all your lines are beautiful and crisp. And there's something about paint. I've always had this thing, as far as I can remember as a model, I always attempted to paint everything I could possibly paint without having to use a decal, if I could help it. Now, I'll just show you here. I think I forgot this one part. So we'll be popping these ones out, right? See? See that? There's a little bit of, excuse me, there's a little bit of overlap because so that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to spray this, but I'm going to take some black and add some green to it, or green and add some black. I want a black green. Yeah, would like the prototype floor, let's say, if I could use that term, would be black and white tiles. But because of scale and, you know, 1-to-1, how things change with light, I always like, I think I mentioned this, adding a bit of green to my black, no matter what. Even with locomotives that are black, that have black, add some green to it, and you'll see the way the light hits it. It just has a more sort of, like, it just has a look that just looks scale. It isn't, like, black is not a color, right? Like, there's no color in black, so add a bit of color to it. So I tint all my colors anyway. So that'll look good with the black, green, and the aged white that I've already done on this, which you can't tell yet because of the yellow contrast. And then once these little center pieces are popped out, I'm going to airbrush this. Excuse me. I'm going to airbrush this, and then I'm going to just cover this part with tape. And then just seal it down good, just press it down good, and then I'll finish building the bar, and then I'll paint the pony walls and the bar, and et cetera, et cetera. And this comes up last, like closer to the end of the build, and it reveals a nice floor, and then I'll just satin coat it. And this will look cool. You can't see this in the Edward Hopper painting, but that's what diner floors were like back then. They were big checkerboard tiles, or they used them later on, mostly too, when they built replicas and restored. Okay. Okay, so time to paint the floor. And just a couple of words here. So there's an art to masking as well, right? So if you want to move into an advanced painter, be prepared to learn to mask, to just do stuff and to mask things off. I don't want to get paint on the inside of the bar here in the wainscoting or the inside of the pony wall, because I don't like excess layers of paint, especially when you go to the trouble to model a lot of fidelity and nice detailed engraving. You don't want to lose it or soften it too much with fat layers of opaque paint. So what I'm going to use here is some rubber black XF85, and I like to thin it lots, like you say, and I add green to this because I want to add color to black, because black isn't a color, right? And I only have a very tiny amount here, and I've opened the window and I got a fan going, and there'll be very little paint here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure everything's working. In this case, always check to see that your needle is seated tight, which I didn't, but now I did, right? Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this black in with the airbrush. There's a couple of thin coats. I'll just let that dry for a minute because Tamiya dries rapidly. And that's all I'm going to do, right? And then once that's put aside for an hour or so, I'll just cut in and tighten the corners there and put maybe 1 or 2 more thin coats on. Then I'll just pick off all those little square pieces of tape and I'll have a nice diner checkerboard floor. And then I'll seal it with satin with a brush, a traditional brush, and then when that's dry, I'll just remask over, peel the rest of this tape off, except for this floor I'm leaving. I'm not doing a checkerboard floor. I just want it white. I don't want too much. I don't want to overwhelm the floor pattern with all checkerboard. I studied photos of diners, and sometimes I just left the back work area and kitchens and everything just white. Only the customer area had that Art Deco checkerboard, okay?